Hello everyone, Anthony here. Hopefully this camera lens is okay. Uh, we're not going to talk about it. This article popped up in my phone's feed this morning and I wanted to go over it and read it. I guess I'll just put it right up here so you guys can follow along. Let me move over a little bit. So it's called, "Here's What the Black Tax Does to So Many Families, Including Mine." So it starts out saying, "As a money coach and a black woman, I've seen the racial wealth disparity firsthand." Now, that's an interesting opening. We're expecting her to describe racial wealth disparities, not just disparities that affect everyone, with an opener like that. So, last month during my weekly FaceTime call with my mother, I noticed she was bundled up in her home. Since the temperature had dropped in Georgia where she lives, I didn't think much of it, even though Mom was wearing a thick winter sweater that seemed more appropriate for New York where she was raised. On the following week's video call, Mom was sporting a turtleneck, so this time I asked her about it and she made a startling confession, sheepishly revealing that she didn't want to turn up the heat and have a larger utility bill, so she was basically toughing out being in a chilly household. When I urged her to warm things up, she assured me it was just a brief temporary decision. So yeah, like it's normal to, there's nothing wrong with trying to save money by putting on a sweater when it's cold out, or even saving energy, conserving energy. Like it's not just about wanting to save money and, oh, you're poor, you're poor, you can't afford heat and all that stuff. Maybe some people want to save money. Maybe they have a goal in mind that they want to achieve. So keeping down their heating bills or whatever helps them with their budgeting goals, or like if they want to buy a car or something like that, or they have like a new pair of shoes that they want, budgeting like that could help them do it. Or maybe they're green and want to conserve energy and not waste energy. Like there's nothing wrong with wearing a sweater in your house when it's chilly out. So when I urged her to warm things up, she assured me it was just brief temporary decision. But the next Sunday, when I saw her dressed in a coat during our regular check-in, I knew it was more serious. "Mom, I will pay your utility bill," I told her. "Turn up the heat to whatever temperature you'd like, but I don't want you sitting there in a cold house." So now her daughter decides she wants to get involved in this, and I'll just go on. So for me, forking over an extra $100 a month for a heating bill is no big deal, but $100 is a lot of money for someone living mainly on a modest Social Security check. An episode served as a harsh reminder of how precarious my mom's financial situation is, especially at this stage of her life. So one thing that I wanted to point out, like, I don't know, I only read like half this article this morning, but I don't remember if like her mom said no about it or whatever. Like obviously she didn't want the help if she said that, if she urged that it was a brief temporary thing or whatever. That stuff really pisses me off. Like when I say like, cause you guys know me, like I live really frugally. I try to save my money this way that I can invest it and that I can buy things like I can buy a house and do whatever. Like I don't want to just waste my money and throw things away frivolously. It's one thing like if I had family and a wife and kids and stuff, then I would want to spend the money on, then I would spend money on things to like fun having things so that we can be fun and build a bond and entertain each other and stuff like that. But with me, like, it's fine. Like, but if no one even comes to me and is like, "Oh, I see you're like staying in your house all the time. Is it because like you don't have enough money to go out and you don't have enough money to go on vacation or whatever?" Uh, and if someone was like, "Oh, let me turn up the heating bill for you," I would be like, no. And then when they, because like I'm making my own decisions, like It's perfectly fine for me. And I think like parents as a whole, it's always been like my grandparents, which I'll probably get into later in this video, but my grandparents had 4 children. My grandmother, she worked at a telephone company, like switching lines, uh, and I don't think that job lasted very long. And my grandfather also worked in the telephone company, I think, but they struggled a lot, and it was at the point like my grandfather would scream at the children for them not finishing the food on their plates, because he didn't want food to go to waste, which you should never do. Like if you have that many children to where you're screaming at your children because like that's your own fault as the parent. That's your fault that you had more children than you can afford. Why are you screaming at the children and putting them through, making them deal with your financial burden? My grandfather, one time when I was a kid, I was staying over their house for the summer. Sometimes, like I think like every year or so when I was a kid, I'd spend a week over there just by myself, or sometimes my sister would go too. And we had the sprinkler out because it was summertime in New York. On Long Island, it was hot. And we had the sprinkler, and I was like, say this is a sprinkler. We were jumping over the sprinkler, going through the sprinkler. And my grandfather loves the like mowing the lawn and taking care of his house and maintaining his house and everything like that. I guess because he had pride in his house, which I think comes from both my grandparents not having anything growing up, that they worked so hard to maintain the stuff that they had, because they didn't want to just lose it to getting damaged. Like if you don't take care of your car, you're gonna lose your car. So anyway, I decided to do a front flip over the sprinkler, and I don't know why, because it's not like I've ever done a front flip and landed on my feet before. It was always just jumping on my bed and doing a flip and landing on my back. So I did that on the sprinkler, and I landed right on top of it and broke it. My grandfather, I think maybe I didn't say anything, but then my grandfather went to use the sprinkler the next day or something and started screaming because he found out about it. And my grandmother is trying to protect me and everything like that. But I've never seen my grandfather so angry. Like I heard the stories as a kid from my grandparents, but that's the first time that I saw it firsthand. And for that whole rest of the week, I just stayed in my room upstairs and didn't talk to anyone or anything like that. And I think for like the next couple of years, I didn't talk to my grandfather. It wasn't until I was much older that then I talked to him about investing and stuff like that, because I knew we had that in common. But yeah, what I was saying is no means no, and it's so hard. Like you hear it so much in the Me Too movement, which I guess has passed, or maybe I just don't pay attention to it that much. But like no means no needs to be universal. It's not just like, it's not only when women receive like sexual advances that are unwelcomed, that they don't want. Like no means no should be universal, because then it's like if someone comes up to me and is like, oh, I see you're wearing a sweater in the house, let me pay your $100 bill or whatever, and they keep insisting, I'm like, I just get frustrated, like they're trying to force me or will me into doing something that I don't want to do. Anyway, at 77, my mom is single, retired, and has no retirement savings at all. Meanwhile, my family and I are doing great financially thanks to entrepreneurship, investments in stocks and real estate, and some other smart money moves. We've amassed a 7-figure net worth. So over $1 million net worth, which congratulations to the author. That's definitely not something easy to achieve. And being a Black woman, it's definitely possible for Black people to achieve these things. I'm sure it's taken hard work for this author to do it, but I think it shows that there's at least some form of systemic racism can't be true. It can't be all true if this Black woman did it. So we're extremely grateful for the privilege we have and count our blessings daily. So she uses the word privilege, but I don't think it's like, I don't think she means it in the sense that when you hear the word privilege with white people, it's like, oh, white people are handed these things. But I think this author understands when she, sorry, there's like noise outside. It's a little bit distracting. But anyway, I think when this author says we're extremely grateful for the privilege we have and count our blessings daily, I think like she's not using it the same way that it would be used for white people. Like it's when she says privilege, it's not this stuff was handed to her. And I don't think stuff was handed to her at all. Especially since we know how rare it is for a black family like us to be in this position. The median black household has a net worth of only $24,000, a fraction of the $188,000 in net worth the median white household has. 2019 Federal Reserve data shows. I guess we can look at it. And also, like, I don't know if there's going to be any new people watching this, but I have a video of like how I became a cryptocurrency millionaire, which like I didn't graduate high school and my parents were completely shitty to me. I don't have any help from family. I don't have any family around me. I spend Christmases alone, all holidays alone and everything like that. But it came from like budgeting and working and being smart and all that stuff. She links an article as her source. She says that it comes from 2019 Federal Reserve data, but she links a Politico article, which Politico is extremely biased, but I was really hoping, so then this links to another thing. According to a Fed survey of consumer finances conducted every 3 years, median wealth of white families is, all right, so this is a survey, it's not a scientific test or research. I'm not gonna, you guys can look at the links in the description. I'm not gonna read all this stuff in this video, but all right, and these numbers don't always show the nuance of financial instability for many black families. A quarter of black households have near zero or negative net worth, compared to a tenth of white families, according to Economic Policy Institute. So again, another article, not really any research that she links to. But anyway, the statistics don't really matter. What matters is why. If you want to help black people, if you want to help any people, the numbers, the statistics, if it's true or not, don't matter. What matters is why. Why is someone poor? Why is someone in poverty? Why can't someone get a job? Whatever. Because once you figure out why, what's holding these people back, then that's how you're going to help. Statistics don't help anything. The reasons for the wealth gap are complicated and multi-layered, with racism, historical injustices, structural inequality, and educational disparities all playing a huge role. Which, like I said in the beginning of the article, it's hard for me to believe this author can justify racism, historical injustices, structural inequality, and educational disparities all playing a role when she was able to become a millionaire as a black woman. So do career choices, marriage status, and inheritance levels for black people, which are starkly lower than for white people. In practice of redlining, for example, under which the government would not guarantee loans for black Americans who were trying to purchase homes. I'm not sure. I guess a guaranteed loan would mean that the government would pay it back if the white person didn't fulfill the loan. I'm not sure that that's actually a thing that happened. I'll look it up real quick. So Wikipedia says that redlining is a systemic denial of various services of goods by federal government agencies, local governments, or the private sector, either directly through selective raising of prices. This is often manifested by placing strict criteria on specific services or goods that often disadvantage poor or minority communities. I think that's a whole other topic, but it's a whole other can of worms to open up. But it seems just like denying loans for someone not capable of paying back a loan, someone in a high risk environment. Like obviously, like you can think of health insurance. Healthcare is obviously going to be more expensive for someone who smokes or someone who doesn't exercise or someone who's obese and doesn't take care of their bodies, because it's going to cost the health system more. So I think that's where this stuff comes from. I don't see anything about these loans being government guaranteed by the government. So, as well as the effect of mass incarceration on Black representation in the workforce, are just a couple of examples on how African Americans are systematically prevented from building wealth. See, I think it's more so of life choices that prevent these things, not actual systemic things in a system or anything like that. So consequently, here's the harsh reality about being Black in America. The deck is often so stacked against you that the weight of it all can feel overwhelming, no matter your income, your net worth, or how much you've achieved. So as someone who achieved success and became a multimillionaire, tell Black people how you did it. That would be the most helpful for them. For African Americans like me, systemic inequalities and generations of poverty can make it seem like whatever you've done is never enough, especially when you know you'll have to help support relatives or make contingency plans for a number of scenarios out of your control. So another thing about like generations of poverty and white people have generations of wealth and whatever. My neighbor would bring this up to me all the time because I told him that my uncle was a millionaire plumber on Long Island. Again, he twisted around to say that I received help from my uncle, which I've never even, like my uncle, one time my uncle gave me $200 to play poker with on the condition that I gave him back the $200 plus half of the winnings that I made. And I lost all of that in like the first couple hands of poker that I played. And then I was sitting there with a friend. A friend took me to Atlantic City, and my friend didn't want to see me just sitting there being bored alone, even though I was perfectly content with it, or contempt, not contempt, getting my words mixed up, but I was perfectly fine with just sitting there. So my friend gave me money to play poker, and he gave me like $100 or something. I ended up turning that $100 into $1,200. So then I paid my friend $200 or $300 from that, and then paid my uncle with that, and then got the electricity turned back on in my apartment with the rest of that money. But I've had zero financial help from my family growing up and everything like that. So it's not like a generational wealth thing that accumulates. Yeah, there are families that save money for their children, so that their children can go to college and all that stuff. These days, like I'm actually thankful that I didn't go to college, because that would have been a huge debt on my part. And a lot of times these days, colleges are so expensive that it's not worth it going to college, and they teach you so little. It's better to go into a trade and become an entrepreneur and teach yourself. Let's see. The reality is that for those of us able to generate wealth and reach a level of comfort, we're often also financially supporting family members and paying down debt. White people do the same thing. White people pay, in-laws move in with white people too, and single parents move in to white people too, with white people too. With my grandparents, so my family members don't have the burden, so to say, of having to take care of my grandparents, because my grandparents are still together. And they can support each other. They were born in 1930, so they're over 90 years old right now. And they're definitely, I haven't talked to them in a number of years, but they're definitely at that age where they should be either in a nursing home or a family member taking care of them. You don't really want to put your grandparents in a nursing home if they were good grandparents. Because nursing homes, they're not really the best place. There's a lot of neglect and abuse, and just look at all the COVID stuff too, how COVID was treated in nursing homes and everything like that. Nursing homes is not the best place for grandparents, but my grandparents are still together, and I think so this author goes on to say that her parents aren't together, which we'll get into a little bit later, but my grandparents are still together, and I think what happened with this author's parents and what happens with my grandparents, they're both similar arguments and stuff that would cause breakups, but it was just so shunned and shameful, I guess, because my grandparents were religious, or they definitely do things that are immoral and not religious. So I don't want to say that they're strict religious followers, but it was always like shameful and shunned to get a divorce. And I think that's why they stayed together and are still together, because of that. So I think like religion has a big thing. It's not like my grandparents had this perfect relationship where everything was just harmonious and everything like that, because that's not true at all. So we simply don't have that generational wealth. So that's why many white families have to fall back on and start out their adult lives with. Another thing I want to point out, just because someone sees me in a new BMW and I'm a white person, treat me as an individual, not this stereotypical white person. I'm sure if this author went out and talked to white families and actually asked them for if these stereotypes were true, like ask them about their personal lives and their histories and all that stuff, she would probably figure out that these stereotypes aren't really true. And that's always like the thing that you struggle with, especially like seeing all the black violence and riots and everything like that because of the protests and everything, and defund the police and these like communist socialist movements and all that I don't agree with. It's very easy to turn racist and be like, oh, I hate black people and black people are the cause of this problem and blah, blah, blah. But I still have to, when I see someone in my day-to-day life, I have to be like, all right, is this person really involved with that? I have to treat this person as an individual and actually deal with their own thoughts and beliefs and whatever in order to have a actual relationship with them. Because I can't just think in my head, oh, there's this black person thinks this way, therefore I hate them. I don't know that. That's just my stereotype that I'm projecting onto them. I have to actually talk to them to find out. So, all right. One could be putting money into savings or investing, while the other might. All right. We skipped a section here. We simply don't have the generational wealth so that so many white families have and can fall back on. Even two people earning the same income can be looking at totally different financial situations based on their race and class. One could be putting money into savings or investing, while the other might be using that same income to pay a family member's rent or help support an aging parent's retirement. What are these things? Even two people earning the same income can be looking at totally different financial situations based on race and class. One could be putting money into savings or investing, while the other might be using that same income to pay for family members' rent or helping support an aging parent's retirement. What does race and class have to do with it? That's not mutually exclusive things to race. I know that people like my mother don't have any real safety net other than relatives. There's no inheritance coming as a result. So also, when you think about this stuff, so her mother on retirement, I think it said something like she's making like $1,800, $1,600 a month, something like that. That's more than I make a month. But so her mom does have a safety net to fall back on called retirement. And I think her mom would want to keep her bills low. This way, she's not putting a burden on her daughter so that her daughter can achieve, so that her daughter is not being burdened by having to pay her utility bills and everything like that. So that $100 a month, instead of paying this heating, her mom can put on a sweater and she can use that $100 a month to invest and do what she wants. There no inheritance coming. And all right, my mother married my father at age 19. I don't think it says how old the age disparity or the age gap between their parents. And then my parents, neither of whom went to college, had 5 girls together in quick succession. So number one, 5 kids. When you just get married, that's a lot. That's a big financial burden. When they met, my dad had been working in as a shoe shine man in Harlem, just like his father and his grandfather. Several years after tying the knot, however, my father moved to from New York to Los Angeles to take a shot at pursuing an acting career. So an insanely competitive career. He chose to move across the country to leave his family to pursue an acting career, which there's such a low percent of becoming famous and making all this money. And so second bad decision. So having all these kids as a shoe shine, then leaving to pursue an acting career, bad decision number 2. When my mother and later followed with kids in tow, so did money problems and a host of other marriage woes. So another thing that I was thinking of is maybe this guy wasn't happy in this relationship, and maybe he fled and left the family because the wife was arguing with him all the time, like, oh, we have all these kids, you have to pay the bills, like you need to get a better job, you need to do this, you need to do that, just typical like nagging stuff. So it could be that her mother drove this guy away as well, which I spent a lot of times with Black families and actually talking to them and getting to know their histories and everything like that. And I see Black women being argumentative and naggy. And it's not just Black women. My mom was like this as well to an extent. And my mom and dad are white, obviously. So I think you guys get where I was coming from or going with that. But just like it could be that her mom drove away her father. So, and also her mom's responsible for this too, because she chose to have kids, have 5 kids with someone who was a shoe shine and didn't have prospects for a better job. So some of my earliest childhood memories are of my parents arguing over finances. So, all right, so that's a clue into what I was saying before about them arguing and him fleeing because he didn't want to. So some of my earliest childhood memories are my parents arguing over finances, including my father's chosen work endeavors. Acting gigs weren't steady, and the shoe shine stand that my father set up in Southern California didn't produce a regular paycheck. With 5 mouths to feed, my mom didn't like him exploring his creative passions or his entrepreneurial side. 100% makes sense. When you have kids, that's your responsibility to take care of your kids. Don't pursue a ridiculous acting career with such small chance of being successful. Michael, you need to get a real job, she would yell at him. By the time I was 7, they divorced, leading to years of increased financial struggle, including periods of when we lived with my mom in a shelter or simply squatted in empty apartments without paying rent. Since my father didn't pay child support payments, my mom, Lucille, juggled multiple jobs, mostly as a secretary and a cashier. Along the way, she made an incredible number of sacrifices for her 5 daughters and always pushed us all to go to college and prioritize education. Ultimately, Mom retired as a school bus driver in the suburban area. So I think when it says that she made a number of sacrifices for her daughters, I think we can see where this behavior is coming from, with her making a sacrifice, putting on a coat or a sweater instead of turning on the heat. That's another sacrifice that she's making for her daughter. And then pushing her to go to college and prioritize education and stuff like that. Not totally a bad thing to prioritize education and be able to support yourself and all that, but I personally would have urged her daughters not to choose a man like their father that would actually be able to support having children and all that. So now she gets a pension of just $182 a month, along with Social Security, roughly $1,500 a month. That's what she's living on, along with occasional money she receives from my husband and me from my oldest sister, Cheryl, who also lives in Georgia. Like so many struggling retirees in America, my mom can sometimes be too proud to ask for help. Again, I don't think it's a pride thing at all. I know she doesn't want to feel like she's imposing on her kids. Then there are times when she won't request assistance because she feels guilty about her own spending. Yeah, I think that's a total misread of the situation. Among Black Americans, it's not uncommon for those who can help family members financially. It's not uncommon for those who can help financially. Among Black Americans, it's not uncommon for those who can to help family members financially. Some call it the black tax. Again, it's white people do the same thing. My first girlfriend's father had his 91-year-old mom living with them when I was dating her back in 2004. So black tax, a term commonly used in South Africa that refers to the obligations of first in the family, college graduates, professionals, and others who make it to assist their family members. I'm happy to help out my mother by covering her needs when she's short on cash. Again, like if you're a good parent, your kids are going to be happy to help. But it can be an emotional experience for her to even ask, especially when her spending choices sometimes exasperate her financial challenges. I'm definitely not judging her, as I've battled the same demons. 20 years ago, I had $100,000 just in credit card debt. So I'm not 100% sure how you accumulate $100,000 in credit card debt. What were you buying with credit cards, and why did banks give you that money in the first place? Which I guess I technically can't say because that kind of goes against redlining. I can't really say, well, why did banks give you $100,000 in the first place? But then it's kind of not congruent to say that redlining is when banks don't give you the money. So you can't really argue, oh, the banks treated me unfairly. They gave me all this money. They gave me $100,000 in loans. So that's why I'm in debt, because it's the bank's fault. But then argue that redlining is bad. Not really a congruent argument, because you can't really argue that redlining is bad, that banks won't give you money. So you're arguing it's bad that banks are giving you money. You're at fault. Banks are at fault for why you're in debt, and then you also argue that banks are at fault for not giving. Banks and governments are at fault for not giving you loans. You're kind of picking both sides of the fence to stand on. Fortunately, I paid it all back by aggressively budgeting, reining in excess spending, and using every bit of extra money. So a skill that I'm sure she witnessed her mom do. Like income tax refunds and work bonuses to attack my debts. And that's also what I do to make money and save money so I can invest and buy stuff. Even though I'm now financially comfortable, if I'm being honest, one of my biggest fears in life is that I might still wind up like my mother, elderly, alone, and nearly destitute. And I think that fear is what's driving her to be so frugal and do all that, save so much money and work so hard and everything. I guess I should probably share at this point that for the past 18 years, I've worked as a money coach and co-owner of a financial education business. So anyone who knows me and my current circumstances may think my fears are ridiculous or that I'm being hyperbolic. For starters, I'm happily married to a great guy who happens to be my business partner too. I'm a Gen Xer and I'm far from broke. So I think I'm probably going to make this argument at some point, but have kids. If you're in a healthy relationship, have kids now, and healthy and financially well off, have kids now, so that you don't put your kids through the same thing that you went through as a child. But I also realized how fragile economic stability can be, both because of my own family and from what I know through my professional work. Even for many higher income African Americans, financial security often feels so tenuous. See what this word means. Very weak or slight. In part because of family demands, and in part because that's just the reality of being Black in America, where historical and current disparities loom so large. Again, I'm not seeing anything about Black disparities in this article at all. I'm not alone in experiencing the realities of living with the Black tax. Recently on the social media app Clubhouse, an entire conversation was devoted to this topic. The room was packed, including with people like Irvin Johnson, a Black millennial who works as an executive at a nonprofit in Washington, D.C. It was like a therapy session for Black professionals. Johnson later told me at the club of the Clubhouse experience. There's so much to unpack about the Black tax, he added, because it's definitely a hidden burden that's in the back of your mind all the time. I mean, just look, her mom doesn't want to put this burden on her daughter. Let it go. You don't have to take care of your family members. It doesn't have to be a burden on you, especially if they're saying no and that they don't want the help. Let it go until they actually do need the help and ask for the help and everything like that. Like many Black people who are the first in their family to earn a high salary, Johnson contributes significantly to his parents' finances, including paying for various healthcare costs, insurance, and more. I'm glad that I'm in a position to help, but you do sometimes feel guilty about your success or about hitting certain goals. He said, it's also a responsibility that sometimes makes you wonder how much further along you could be financially. With my mom's permission, I looked recently at her Social Security statement, which details her earnings record for more than 40 years that she worked. The statement showed that for most of her life, my mother earned from $15,000 to $25,000 a year. In her two highest grossing years, 2000 and 2001, she earned $31,000 and $33,000. The part that shocked me at that wonders how on earth did she raise 5 girls on such a small sum. But another part of me, the kid who dealt with the lights being disconnected or who frequently stood on our apartment's heat grates to stay warm, knows how. My mother's grit, prayers, determination, and her girls would have a better life than she had. This video is already long. I'm going to look through the rest of this article and see if I have any more points to bring up. But I think I've made all my points so far, but we'll see. I just don't want to continue on this whole article when there's nothing to really talk about. All right, I guess one other thing. We survived with help of welfare and various federal assistance programs like food stamps, Section 8 housing vouchers, and government powdered milk. So, of course, all at the time being paid for, a majority of white workers are the ones whose tax dollars are going to pay for this. And no thank you, nothing like that from any of these people. And I'm not just saying the author specifically, but again, just looking at the movement as a whole. No thank you to the people whose tax dollars are paying for all these programs. Instead, white people just get turned into the enemy and the villains and all that, and get attacked for being white. So then she talks about, I remember from ages 9 to 16, along with my Black and Latino peers who grew up in various low-income neighborhoods, busing into wealthy white school districts. There I'd hang out in the upscale neighborhoods like Brentwood and Pacific Palisades, where kids all had their own bedrooms, sprawling homes with pianos in the family rooms and pools in the backyard. You can ask these families, oh, what did you do to achieve this? That's what I liked. My neighbor's kids would ask me, Black family, she was a single mother through most of the time that I knew her, but these kids would ask me like what I did, and I'd take my time to tell them exactly what I did to get my BMW. They really like seeing my car and everything like that. And I'd take my time and I'd explain to them. But again, I know I spoke about this before, and I spoke about this recently with my ex-girlfriend's father, my first ex-girlfriend. I remember seeing all that stuff when I was a kid, looking at the house that he had and everything, and I'm like, how can I ever afford this for Danielle? How can I ever afford this for his daughter, for my girlfriend? Because I had no hopes, and now looking at me now being able to buy a house in cash that's equivalent price and neighborhood to what she grew up in and what he has, it's crazy what hard work and can do for you and what can change in the future, you know, because I was someone suicidal, like seriously suicidal, with no hopes and prospects for the future. So that's just one thing with being suicidal and stuff. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So it does kind of mention her with children here. So perhaps that's why I'm now so determined, especially after having children, to make generating wealth a part of my legacy. So when she says, especially after having children, it doesn't say if this is a goal of hers after she decides to have children or if she already had children. We believe so strongly in home ownership and education as paths to building wealth that my husband and I have made a commitment to give our children the kind of financial assistance my mother wasn't able to provide for me, including paying for college, a car, and down payment on our first home. So one thing with home ownership, I don't think houses are good investments. I think, yeah, their value maybe generally goes up with inflation and all that, but uh, I think there's much better places to put money into than a house, to invest money into than a house, and that houses, like vehicles, should just be tools to raise your family, because that's another thing. Like with a house, if you buy a house, then you're always yelling at your kids because they put a marker on the wall or something like that when it takes like 2 seconds to paint a wall. Uh, you don't want you don't want to be yelling at your kids. You don't want your kids to not have a childhood because you're afraid of uh, them damaging your house and all that stuff. Uh, but also you have to think like, yeah, when you have children and when you are able to provide for your children and provide them with college and a car and down payment on a house and all this stuff, at the same time you're kind of denying them that work ethic. You're providing for your kids, and then you're like, oh, are my kids being spoiled? They're never going to learn how to provide for themselves and achieve, especially what the parent did. So it's kind of like, so it definitely has the potential. It's like, all right, my parents were really poor, so then now I'm going to work my way up so that I don't give my kids the same thing. So then you work your way up, and then you give your kids all these things. So now your kids don't know how to work their way up because you just gave them everything. Uh, so it's a very fine balance. It's like rags to riches in a couple generations. It's really hard to have money transfer between generations, and I don't know if the author actually sees this that way. Uh, but it in actuality it is that way.